Columbus has never been a dream city for me. An ordinary industrial center of the Midwest is not the most inspiring place for a 32-year-old woman who once dreamed of more. But this is where I, Miriam Holden, have been stuck for a long time, perhaps forever. Every morning I drive past the same gray buildings, familiar to every crack in the pavement, on my way to the Midwest Logistics Solutions office, where I coordinate East Coast trucking. My job is an endless stream of phone calls, emails, and spreadsheets. Logistics coordinator. It sounds more solid than it is. Essentially, I spend all day solving other people's problems. A truck broke down, a driver got sick, a customer changed requirements at the last minute. Honestly, this job is a mirror of my life. Miriam will sort it all out. Miriam will sort it out. Miriam will take over. These are phrases I've heard since I was a kid, and not just at work. In my family, I've always been the one to rely on. Responsible Miriam. Reliable Miriam. While my younger sister Winifred, who everyone calls Winnie, was the creative and free-spirited one. I wonder how such different children grow up in the same family. Our mother, Octavia Holden, a 62-year-old widow with a claim to aristocracy, despite 20 years as a clerk at an insurance company, always gravitated toward Winnie. Winnie inherited her delicate features, her blonde hair, and her ability to get her way without much effort. I was like my father, a little more massive, with unruly brown hair and a habit of silently carrying everything around. My father died when I was 19 and Winnie was 14. A heart attack right in the hardware store where he'd worked all his life. Ever since then, I've been kind of a lifeline for the family. After my father died, I had to leave college. Someone had to work while my mother recovered, and Winnie needed support to overcome the trauma. My trauma was apparently less important. Winnie is now 27 and works as a receptionist at a beauty salon. Or rather, she's listed there. Her work schedule is so flexible that sometimes I wonder if she gets paid at all. She lives on her own, in an apartment that I partially pay for, a temporary help that lasted 3 years. Miriam, you do realize that a paycheck in the beauty industry is a tier. I need time to build a client base, she says every time I gently remind her of our arrangements. Her mother, after retiring last year, also needs a little support. Her pension is barely enough for medicine, though by some miracle she always has money for new shoes and a membership to the local book club, which is more like a neighborhood discussion club. I sit in my apartment, a small but neat two-bedroom in the Clintonville neighborhood, and look at the calendar on my phone. Sunday is highlighted in red. Lunch at my mom's, 15 o'clock. A weekly ritual that sucks more energy out of me than 5 days of work. As of late, I've started taking Ezra, my boyfriend of 4 months, with me. He teaches history at the local community college, wears funny vintage glasses, and totally doesn't fit in with my family. For the first time in a long time, I'm in a relationship that didn't fall apart after a couple weeks because of my perpetual busyness with family issues. Ezra is understanding, calm, and has a slightly odd sense of humor. The first time I brought him to a family dinner, my mother called me afterward and said, "Honey, are you sure? He seems so unsettled." In her vocabulary, unsettled is a terrible insult. Only impractical could be worse. I glance at the clock. It's still a full day before lunch, but anxiety is already creeping up with a familiar heaviness in my stomach. I know what's coming. Mother will recount her many illnesses, most of which exist only in her imagination. Winnie will complain about work, about her ex-boyfriend, about the weather, about anything. And then, over dessert, it will begin. "Miriam, could you please?" And the list of things I have to do for them in the coming week. My apartment is the only place I can hide from it all. A small living room with a gorgeous view but a comfy couch. Bookshelves filled with detectives and popular science fiction. My way of escaping from reality. A kitchen where I can make myself dinner without thinking about someone else's dietary restrictions and whims. My quiet island. My phone vibrates. A message from my mother. "Don't forget to buy my medicine on the way. And can you stop by that bakery I love? Vinny wants their chocolate cake." I look at the message and feel something between tiredness and irritation rise in my chest. The pharmacy is on the opposite side of the street from my mom's house, and the bakery is in a different neighborhood altogether. My Sunday route lengthens by an hour again. I open the to-do list on my phone and add these items. The list for this weekend is already impressive. Fix my mom's faucet, the plumber is too expensive. Help Winnie write a resume, for the third time this year. Take my mom's old clothes to the thrift store. Ezra offered to go with me, but I declined. The last time he was at a family dinner, his mother made him listen for 2 hours about her knee problems, and Winnie tried to find out if he had any better buddies than himself. I'll keep him out of family problems this time. The phone rings. Winnie. I take a deep breath before answering it. Miri. She's the only one who calls me that, and only when she needs something. Are you on your way to Mom's? Lunch isn't until tomorrow, Winnie. Yeah, but I thought maybe you could pick me up today. I need to pick up some dry cleaning, and it's near your house. The dry cleaners are a 15-minute walk from my house, but 45 minutes from Winnie's apartment. Nearby in her geography means convenient for her. I have plans today, Winnie, is a lie, but a small one. In fact, I plan to spend all day at home reading a book and cooking dinner for myself, a luxury I can rarely afford. What plans? I can hear the disbelief in her voice. In her world, I'm not entitled to a life of my own. Personal, I answer firmly. Miri, you know this dry cleaner closes at 16 on Saturdays, and I need the dress tomorrow. I have a date after my mom's lunch. Of course she has a date. Winnie always has an excuse why she can't stay after lunch and help Mommy with something. That's always left up to me. I'm sorry, Winnie, but you're going to have to deal with this on your own. Pause. I can almost see her pouting her lips. Okay, I'll ask Brooke to give me a ride, she says finally, mentioning her next boyfriend. But you owe me now. I owe her for not honoring a request she had no right to ask. Winnie's logic. I'll see you tomorrow, I say, and end the call. I throw the phone on the couch and close my eyes. Fatigue comes over me in a wave. Not physical, emotional. The feeling of being used all the time, but you can't say no because it's family? Because it's always been that way? Because I'm afraid that if I stop being helpful, they'll stop needing me at all. I go into the kitchen and pour myself a glass of wine. It's too early for alcohol, but I call it preparing for tomorrow's lunch. I sit by the window and look outside, a normal October day in Columbus. The leaves are starting to turn yellow and people are hurrying about their business. I wonder if everyone's families are this complicated. Or are there families somewhere where you are loved for nothing, without conditions or obligations? The phone vibrates again. This time, a message from Ezra. Want to go to the movies tonight? They're showing the Kubrick retrospective. I smile and reply, I'd love to. At least part of the weekend will belong to me. And tomorrow? Tomorrow I will once again put on the mask of the responsible daughter and the sister who solves all problems. I always do. After a busy work week, I came home on Friday particularly exhausted. Our company had lost a major contract, and the entire logistics department was frantically rearranging routes to make up for the loss. I'd spent the last 3 days talking to disgruntled drivers and even more disgruntled bosses. All I dreamed of was a hot bath and a glass of wine. The apartment greeted me with the usual silence. Ezra had extra classes with students today and had warned me he'd be late. We planned to just order pizza and watch something uncomplicated, the perfect Friday night after a week like this. I dropped my shoes at the front door, and first thing I did was turn on the kettle. Then I pulled the rest of last night's pasta out of the fridge. I didn't have the energy or desire for a full dinner. While the food was warming up in the microwave, I checked my email on my phone, mostly advertising newsletters and bill reminders. The microwave buzzed, and I picked up the plate, settling down on the couch with it. The phone vibrated again. A new message. I glanced at the screen. A voicemail from Winnie. It was odd, because she usually preferred text, saying that voicemails are for boomers. Must be something urgent. I pressed play and continued eating, but after a few seconds I froze with my fork in the air. Mom, you won't believe what happened today. Winnie's voice sounded animated, with that special tinge of excitement she gets when she's about to gossip. Nerdy Miriam lectured me again about responsibility and budgeting. Can you imagine? Her, who is so predictable that I can tell you with minute-to-minute accuracy when she's going to call on Sunday to check if I need to buy something for lunch. I set the plate on the table. A chill ran down my spine. The message clearly wasn't meant for me. Winnie had mixed up her contacts, thinking she was sending it to her mother. I told her my paycheck was going to be delayed and she immediately offered to help with the rent. Winnie continued with a chuckle. So predictable. You know I don't have any money problems, but why not take advantage of her big responsible sister complex? She's so proud of her role as savior that she doesn't even ask questions. My heart clenched painfully. Is that how it was? I set my phone aside, not wanting to listen any further, but something made me press play again. And this new boyfriend of hers is Ezra. Winnie said his name with such disdain it made me nauseous. God, remember how he was talking about his students at the last lunch? So proud of his work, like teaching history at a community college was some kind of accomplishment. You're right, Mom. He's way out of her league. Although, what's Miriam's league? I mean, she's all proper and boring. I felt a lump come up in my throat. My hands began to shake and I gripped the phone tighter. Oh, and you know what the funny thing is? Winnie continued. She actually thinks I'm using that money for rent. I'm saving half of it for a trip to Miami this winter. Why not? Our useful idiot Miriam will never ask exactly how I spent her money anyway. Useful idiot. Those words hit me like a slap in the face. I sank down onto the couch, feeling the ground go from under my feet. Mom, you should see her apartment. Vinny's voice grew quieter, conspiratorial. It's so mediocre. Secondhand furniture, books everywhere like a library. No style, no taste. She could have a much better life if she didn't spend so much on us. But hey, I can't complain, can I? As long as she feels needed, we can take advantage of her generosity. I closed my eyes, trying to hold back the tears that were coming. Every word Winnie said was like a knife in my back. And those perpetual questions of hers about whether you need help paying the bills, Winnie continued. I've seen the way you roll your eyes when she's not looking. She actually believes your pension isn't enough for basic expenses, like you can't afford a trip to the spa every month. A spa? My mother, who complained every week about barely making ends meet, who I helped pay the utility bills for, believing she'd be without electricity otherwise? Okay, Mom, I've got to run. I'll see you Sunday at lunch. Don't forget to make that face when Miriam starts talking about her promotion. That, I'm so proud of you, honey face. You and I both know that logistics coordinator is just a high-profile title for someone who's on the phone with truckers all day. Love you. The message ended, and a deafening silence hung in the apartment. I sat motionless, feeling something inside me break. 13 years. 13 years since my father died, and I took on the role of the family's pillar. 13 years of sacrifice, of compromise, of endless help. And all the while they were laughing behind my back. I stood up and walked to the window. It was already dark outside, and all I could see was my reflection in the glass, a pale face with eyes widened with shock. Who was this woman? This useful idiot who had been used for years? My phone vibrated again, a message from Winnie. Sorry, wrong contact. Ignore the previous voicemail, it was for a friend. We're making up a skit for her birthday. Obvious lie. Typical Winnie, instead of apologizing, makes a ridiculous excuse. I didn't answer. What could I say? It's okay. I always knew you were using me. Don't worry, I'm used to being the family ATM. The phone rang, an incoming one from my mother. Of course, Winnie had immediately called her and now they were trying to hush the situation. I rejected the call. A minute later, a message came through. Miriam, call me back. Winnie explained everything. It's just a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. 13 years of deception is just a misunderstanding? I turned off the sound on my phone and put its screen down. I needed to think, but my thoughts were jumbled. A heaviness was building in my chest, and it was getting harder and harder to breathe. The doorbell rang, snapping me out of my daze. Ezra. I'd completely forgotten about our plans for tonight. I opened the door, trying to gather my thoughts. Ezra was standing there with a box of pizza and a bottle of wine, but his smile faded when he saw my face. Miriam? What's wrong? I didn't answer, just stepped aside, letting him pass. Ezra walked into the kitchen, put the pizza and wine on the table, then came back to me. His eyes behind the glasses were full of concern. Hey, he touched my shoulder gently. What happened? I wanted to explain, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I just pointed to my phone. Listen to the last voicemail from Vinny. Ezra frowned but took the phone and pressed play. I watched his face as he listened, first bewilderment, then shock, then anger. When the message ended, he put the phone down and just hugged me, tight and secure. I'm so sorry, Miri. There was no fake sympathy in his voice, no attempt to justify Winnie and my mother, just genuine empathy. And somehow that broke the last of the barriers. I burst into tears, snuggling into his shoulder. We sat there for so long I cried, and Ezra just held me, saying nothing. When the tears finally dried up, I felt devastated, but in a strange way, thinking more clearly. I always suspected something was wrong, I said, wiping my eyes. There was always this feeling that I was giving more than I was getting, but I thought that was the way it was supposed to be. That family was about sacrifice. Family is about reciprocity, Ezra replied quietly. Support should go both ways. We moved to the couch. The pizza was cooling in the kitchen, forgotten. Ezra poured me some wine and I took a big sip, feeling the warmth spread through my body. What are you going to do? He asked, not pushing, just asking. I don't know, I answered honestly. Part of me wants to call them and tell them what I think. The other part of me wants to just disappear from their lives. Ezra nodded, not rushing me into a decision. They'll call and text all night, I continued. They'll make 1,000 excuses. They'll say I misunderstood. Do you want to listen to them? I shook my head. No, not tonight, maybe never. We sat in silence. A car drove by outside the window, headlights illuminating the room for a second. I thought about all the years I'd put their needs before my own, about the overtime to pay for my mom's meds, about weekends spent helping Winnie with her endless crises, about how I put off my dreams because family is more important. You know, I finally said, they don't even ask how I'm doing, ever. When I come to these lunches, they only talk about their problems, about their needs, about what they need from me. Ezra took my hand. You deserve better than that, Miriam. In that moment, something clicked inside of me. I did deserve more. Deserved respect, gratitude, reciprocity. I deserved a family that loved me, not used me. We eventually warmed up the pizza and turned on the movie we planned to watch, but I barely followed the plot. My brain was working, processing the information, rearranging the whole picture of my life to take into account the new data. Every memory was now seen differently, not as moments of familial intimacy, but as episodes of manipulation. When Ezra fell asleep next to me on the couch, I carefully slipped out from under his arm and returned to the window. Columbus nighttime twinkled with lights, indifferent to my personal drama. Somewhere out there in her apartment, Winnie was probably making up new excuses. In her house, my mother was probably preparing a speech about how I had gotten it all wrong. And I stood there, in my mediocre apartment, with its used furniture and library-like books, and for the first time in a long time I felt the veil fall from my eyes. I saw the truth. Brutal, unpleasant, but liberating. This night would be a sleepless night, I knew that. But it wouldn't be a night of despair or self-pity. It would be a night of planning. Because if there's one thing I'm really good at, it's planning and organizing. After all, I became a logistics coordinator for a reason. And maybe it's time to apply those skills to my own life. Saturday morning found me at the kitchen table with my third cup of coffee and a notebook scribbled with notes. As I'd anticipated, the night passed without sleep. Ezra had left for home around midnight, offering to stay, but I needed to be alone. I needed to think. I turned my phone off as soon as he left. I had no desire to read Vinny's and my mother's messages, full of feigned remorse or more likely accusations that I was overreacting. I needed silence and clarity of thought. Outside the window, dawn colored the sky a soft pink, contrasting with the darkness that swirled inside me. I felt not so much anger as deep disappointment. Disappointment in them, in myself, in the way I had allowed this relationship to develop over the years. My first impulse was to call and tell them everything, to vent 13 years of accumulated resentment and frustration. But I knew it wouldn't be satisfying. They would deny it, downplay it, turn the tables. Winnie would become the victim, Mother would take the role of the outraged innocent, and I'll be left feeling like I was screaming into the void. No, I needed something else. Something that would make them feel the consequences of their actions, but still allow me to maintain my dignity. Useful idiot. Those words kept echoing in my head. I took a blank sheet of paper and wrote in the center, "How have I been helpful?" Under this heading, I began to make a list of all the financial obligations I had taken on. A $600 rent transfer to Winnie each month, a utility payment to my mother of about $250 a month, an automatic grocery delivery subscription for my mother of $100 a week, insurance for Winnie's car that I paid quarterly, regular emergency loans to both of them, averaging $300 to $400 a month. The list went on and on. I had never calculated exactly how much I was spending on them each month, but now, seeing all these items on paper, I was stunned. Almost a third of my paycheck was going to support two grown women who, it turns out, could do quite well without my help. But it wasn't just about the money. I turned the page and wrote, "Time and emotional resources." The list was even longer: weekly visits with my mother, help with household chores, running errands for both of them, emotional support in all their crises, constant availability by phone, canceling my own plans for their needs. I leaned back in my chair, feeling strangely numb. How could I have let it get this far? When had I gone from being a daughter and sister to a combination of an ATM machine and a psychological support service? After my father died, of course. Then, at 19, I'd taken on his role. I'd become the backbone of the family. But my father would never let them treat me like that. He set boundaries that I, in my desire to be needed and useful, completely erased. I titled page 3, Action Plan. And for the first time in a long time, I felt energized. I've always been good at planning. It's literally my job. Now I'm going to apply those skills to my own life. The first point I wrote was, no confrontation. I wasn't going to make dramatic scenes or shout accusations. That would have been a waste of energy and would have given them the opportunity to manipulate me back into guilt or pity. The second item was, cancel all automatic payments. I opened my laptop and logged into online banking. One by one, I canceled the regular transfers to my mother and Winnie's accounts, the subscriptions I paid for them, the automatic payments on their accounts. With each click of the cancel button, I felt an invisible weight fall off my shoulders. The third item, last Sunday lunch. I decided to go to it as usual. They will undoubtedly act like nothing happened. They will smile, joke, ask for more favors. And I will watch this performance with a new understanding, memorizing every detail, every nuance of their fake concern. It will be my farewell to a role I've played for far too long. I imagined how they would react in the days and weeks to come when they realized their useful idiot was no longer answering the phone, solving their problems, transferring money. Winnie won't be able to go to Miami on my money. Mother will find that her story about her inadequate pension no longer works. But I needed to be prepared for another scenario. They might try to get me back, inundate me with messages, show up at my door apologizing, or, more likely, with dramatic new stories of their troubles. I have to be prepared for that. I added a fourth item, reinforce boundaries. This included blocking their numbers after the last lunch, deleting them from social media, and warning coworkers and friends that I wanted no contact with them. By 10 o'clock in the morning, the plan was ready, detailed by day and even hour. All I had to do was execute it. I closed the notebook, feeling a strange mixture of determination and sadness. Not for them, for the relationship we could have had if they were capable of true familial love. I finally turned my phone on. As expected, it exploded with notifications. 7 missed calls from my mother, 11 from Winnie, countless messages from both of them. I opened one from Winnie. "Miri, you've got it all wrong. It was a joke, I swear. Call me back, please." From my mother. "Honey, we need to talk. Winnie explained to me what happened. I'm sure it's just a simple misunderstanding. Call me when you can." Not a word of sincere remorse, not a hint of admitting the truth. Just an attempt to gloss over the situation, to get things back to normal. I didn't reply. Instead, I texted Ezra, asking if he wanted to meet for lunch. I needed to see someone who really appreciated me before I went to this last family performance. Ezra responded almost instantly, suggesting we meet at our favorite cafe in an hour. I smiled. At least in one relationship in my life, there was sincerity. I showered, changed into fresh clothes, and felt oddly relieved as I left the apartment. as if overnight I'd shed the heavy backpack I'd been lugging around for years. At the cafe, Ezra was already waiting for me at our usual table by the window. He looked worried, but when he saw my calm face, he relaxed a little. "How are you?" he asked when I sat down across from him. "Better than I expected," I answered honestly. I decided what to do. I told him my plan, not going into all the details, but explaining the general strategy. Ezra listened intently, not interrupting, only nodding occasionally. "You won't confront them?" he asked when I was done. "No, it's useless. They won't hear, won't understand, won't recognize. I'll just disappear from their lives." Slowly and quietly. Ezra looked at me thoughtfully. I admire your approach. A lot of people would have made a scene, made accusations. What good would that have done? I shrugged. They'd just make sure I was dramatizing, as Vinny always says. No, I want to keep my dignity. And I want them to experience what it's like to lose my support. Are you sure you can go to that last dinner? His eyes behind his glasses were full of worry. Pretend everything's okay? I smiled. I've been doing it for 13 years, Ezra. One last time I can do it. We spent the rest of lunch talking about other topics. His students, the new book we were both reading, plans for next weekend. For the first time in a long time, I talked about the future without the "unless I have a family emergency" caveat. It was a strange but satisfying feeling to plan a life based solely on my wants and needs. As we said goodbye outside the cafe, Ezra hugged me tightly. "You're stronger than you think, Miriam," he said. "And I'm here for you no matter what happens." I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. In that moment, I realized more clearly than ever the difference between real support and the exploitation my mother and sister passed off as familial intimacy. Back home, I continued to prepare for tomorrow. I ordered a cake from the very bakery my mother had asked for, a final gesture of helpful Miriam. I made a shopping list, including medication for mother, one last time. I even picked out an outfit, a simple but elegant dress that I had recently bought but hadn't worn yet. Let the last image of Miriam they would remember be a beautiful one. Toward evening, I checked my phone again. More messages and missed calls. But now among them were these. "Miriam, don't forget to bring my medicine tomorrow. And can you come over early? I need help with my computer," from my mother. And, "Hey Miri, can I borrow your black bag for tomorrow? And by the way, I need $500 for car repairs. Can you wire it to me today?" From Winnie. Not a word about last night's voicemail. Not a hint of apology. They'd just decided it was okay to keep it quiet and carry on as normal. I took a deep breath, fighting the temptation to reply something harsh. Instead, I wrote neutrally, "I'll be there tomorrow at 15 as usual. I'll bring cake and medicine." I ignored Winnie completely. Let him get used to it. In the evening, I made myself dinner, opened a bottle of wine, and turned on my favorite movie. Tomorrow would be a tough day, the last performance as a caring daughter and sister. But tonight I allowed myself to relax and feel relieved about the decision I had made. Before going to bed, I went over my plan one more time, making sure I hadn't missed anything. Everything was ready. Tomorrow afternoon, I would begin a new chapter of my life, without toxic relationships, without constant manipulation, without being the eternal savior. I closed the notebook and turned off the light. For the first time in a long time, I fell asleep with a sense not of anxiety before another family dinner, but of quiet determination. Determination to finally start living for myself. Sunday morning was overcast with gray clouds over Columbus, as if nature was in tune with my inner state. I woke up before my alarm clock feeling strangely calm. The decision had been made, the plan was made. Now all that was left was to act. I leisurely made myself coffee and avocado toast, a small luxury I couldn't usually afford on family dinner days when all the time was spent preparing. Today, however, I decided not to rush into anything. Let this last day begin by taking care of myself, not them. At 14 o'clock, I got in the car, loading the trunk with grocery bags, a box of cake from the bakery, and a bag of medicine for my mother. It was business as usual, only now I looked at these things differently, not as expressions of love, but as symbols of the dependency they created. The drive to my mother's house took about 20 minutes. a familiar route that I'd taken every Sunday for so many years that I could have driven it with my eyes closed. Today, though, I noticed details I hadn't paid attention to before: a new cafe sign on the corner, flowers in the front garden of a neighboring house, a crack in the asphalt that looked like a lightning bolt. I guess when you do something for the last time, everything is more acute. As I pulled up to the house, I noticed Winnie's car parked by the sidewalk. That meant she was already here. I took a deep breath, reminding myself of the plan. No confrontations, no accusations. Just observe and memorize. This is the last performance. As soon as I opened the door with my key, I heard my mother's voice from the kitchen. "Miriam, is that you? Finally. We've been waiting. Winnie has to leave early and you're late." I looked at my watch. 15:03. 3 minutes late had become a serious misdemeanor. Before, I would have started apologizing, explaining traffic or stoplights. Today, I just smiled and headed into the kitchen, carrying the bags. "Hello," I said, setting the purchases on the table. "I brought everything you asked for." My mother, dressed in one of her homemade but presentable outfits, was fussing over the stove. Winnie sat at the table, staring at her phone. Neither of them even looked up to say hello. "Put the cake in the refrigerator," the mother commanded. "And get my pills. This weather is giving me a headache." I obediently followed the instructions, watching them with a new understanding. I used to see these commands as a sign of intimacy. The family wasn't exactly a requesting family. Now I saw it for what it really was: a servant's attitude, not a daughter's. "Hi, Miri," Winnie finally noticed me, still on the phone. "Did you text me yesterday about the money?" "No," I replied calmly. "You texted me, asking for $500 to fix my car." "Oh, yeah," she shrugged. "Did you wire it? I need it today." "Not yet," I smiled. "I'll wire it later." She nodded, sinking back into the phone, completely satisfied with my answer. No thank you, no explanation of why she really needed the money. Just the assurance that, as usual, I would fulfill her request. "Miriam," my mother called, stirring something in the pot. "Don't just stand there. Start chopping the salad. And tell me, how's your week going? Everything okay at work?" That question wasn't an expression of interest in my life. It was a signal to start the usual ritual. I talk about work, they listen half-heartedly, then turn the conversation to their own problems. "It's okay," I replied, pulling out a cutting board. "It was a tough time, but we got through it." "I hope you at least get promoted soon," Winnie put in. "You've been working there for so many years and you're still in the same position." I didn't say anything, remembering what she'd said about my job in the voicemail. Just a high-profile title for someone who's on the phone with truckers all day. Now she's pretending to be worried about my career. "Leave your sister alone," my mother intervened, but not in my defense as it might have seemed. "She has a stable job, thank you very much. Not everyone can be ambitious." I almost laughed. My mother, who had worked as a clerk all her life, who had never sought a promotion, was suddenly talking about ambition. But I held back and continued chopping vegetables for the salad. "By the way, Miriam," my mother continued, "I need you to take me to the doctor next week. I have new symptoms and my doctor has finally agreed to see me." "Of course," I agreed easily, knowing it would never happen. "When exactly?" "Thursday, 10 a.m. You can take the day off, right? It's important." In the past, I would have mentally rearranged my schedule, wondering how to explain the need for time off to my boss. Now I just nodded. "No problem. I'll be there." "And you can stop by the dry cleaners to pick up my coat," she added, as if it were a matter of course. Lunch went exactly as I'd expected. Mother talked about her many illnesses, half of which existed only in her imagination. Winnie complained about work, about an ex-boyfriend, about the weather, about anything. I listened and watched, noticing now all the manipulative tricks that had previously passed my attention. The way they exchanged glances when I looked away. How they interrupted me if I tried to tell them something about my life. How they used phrases like, "You understand. You've always been the most responsible. We're counting on you so much." The perfect hooks for someone with lifeguard syndrome. "Oh yes, Miriam," the mother remembered over dessert. "I wanted to ask you to help pay for a new air conditioner. The old one is completely broken and summer is coming. It's going to cost about $1,000. Summer's coming. It was October. Summer was more than 6 months away. But I smiled and said, "Sure, Mom. I'll see what I can do." I knew I could count on you. She patted my hand. You've always been my trustworthy girl. There was no warmth or gratitude in her eyes, just calculation. I thought I'd feel pain at that realization, but strangely I felt only relief. It was as if I'd finally seen the truth I'd refused to admit for so long. After dessert, Winnie got ready as usual. She had an important date. She kissed her mother on the cheek, nodded to me, and then, at the door, remembered. "Oh, Miri, don't forget that money. And can I pick up your black bag tomorrow? I need to impress my clients." "Sure," I smiled. "Drop by." She left without saying thank you, completely confident that everything would be just the way she wanted it. Left alone with my mother, I helped clear the table and wash the dishes. We worked in silence, and I thought about how this routine repeated itself week after week, year after year. I would arrive, cook, clean, listen to their problems, promise to help. They took it for granted. "Miriam," my mother broke the silence when we were done with the dishes. "What's wrong with you today? You seem distant." I was surprised by her observation. She usually didn't notice my mood unless it directly affected her comfort. "Just tired," I answered. "It's been a rough week." Yeah, you said that." She waved me away, losing interest. "By the way, while you're here, could your Ezra take a look at my computer? He's good at this stuff, right? Something with the internet." Even in that simple question, there was manipulation. Your Ezra, as if he was my property to dispose of as I saw fit. And of course, she hadn't even thought to ask him directly for help. It was up to me. "I'll ask him," I nodded, knowing I never would. My mother smiled, satisfied with the answer. "Good. And remind me before you go. I want to give you a grocery list for next week." I nodded again, feeling impatience growing inside. I wanted to end this performance already, walk out the door and never come back. But I had to finish the part. Before I left, my mother did hand me a grocery list, a long and detailed one, including specific brands and even the stores where I needed to buy them. I folded the list neatly and tucked it into my bag, as if I were going to fulfill this errand. "I'll see you Thursday," my mother said as I stood in the doorway. "Don't be late for your doctor's appointment." "Of course, Mom." I smiled and hugged her. It was probably the last time I'd ever seen her, and part of me, the part that still remembered the little girl who loved her mother unconditionally, felt a pang of sadness. But that sadness wasn't about the present, it was about the past, about what could have been if we had been a normal, healthy family. As I got into the car, I felt strangely light, as if I had dropped a heavy backpack after a long hike. I pulled into the driveway and didn't look back. This house, this relationship, this role, it was all behind me. When I got home, the first thing I did was pull out my phone and open the settings. I blocked my mother and Winnie's numbers, deleted them from my contact list. Then I logged into my social media accounts and changed the privacy settings, hiding my profile from them. I unsubscribed from their updates, deleted them from my friends. It felt strange, like I was erasing them from my life with the touch of a finger. But I knew it was necessary. They're not the kind of people who let go of a useful resource easily. They would call, write, maybe even come to my house. I had to be ready for anything. Finished with the phone, I opened my laptop and wrote an email to my boss, requesting a meeting for tomorrow. I had a ripe idea. Ask for a transfer to another office in the company, maybe even in another city. A new beginning in every sense. Then I texted Ezra, telling him briefly how the lunch went and thanking him for his support. I didn't ask him to come tonight. I needed time to process what had happened, to get used to the new sense of freedom. I spent the evening sorting out my closet. I threw out old things I'd kept for years just in case, boxed up photos and mementos of my family. Not to destroy them, just to keep them out of sight, a constant reminder of the past. Before going to bed, I took a hot bath, poured myself a glass of wine, and settled down with a book. The little pleasures I'd so rarely been able to afford before, constantly dealing with other people's problems. Lying in bed, I thought about what would happen next. Tomorrow, Winnie would find out I hadn't wired her the money and start calling. When she realizes I've blocked her, she'll probably send angry messages through mutual friends or come to my house. The mother will realize I'm not coming on Thursday and will also start trying to contact me. It won't be easy. It would probably hurt. But I was ready for it. I was finally seeing the truth and I wasn't going to go back to my old role. I turned off the light and closed my eyes. For the first time in a long time, I fell asleep not with anxiety about tomorrow's responsibilities to my family, but with a sense of anticipation. Anticipation of the new life I would build for myself, without manipulation, without guilt, without having to constantly sacrifice my interests for those who took it for granted. My new life was starting tomorrow, and I was ready for it. The April sun peeked through the windows of my new apartment in the Grandview neighborhood. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, reviewing work documents before starting my day. Birds were singing outside the window, and somewhere in the distance, a lawnmower was cutting the first spring grass. It had been almost 6 months since that Sunday lunch, the last in my former life. Those 6 months had been both the most challenging and the most liberating of my life. After I blocked my mother and Winnie's numbers, they didn't give up easily, as I expected. The first few weeks were a real ordeal. They wrote to my work email, contacted me through mutual friends, even came to my apartment. Winnie threw a tantrum in the hallway when she discovered I had changed the lock and wouldn't let her in. My mother sent a heartbreaking letter about how I had broken her heart with my inexplicable betrayal. There were moments of almost unbearable loneliness. Nights when I woke up crying, doubting my decision. Days when my hand reached for the phone to call them, to see if everything was okay. The habits of 32 years don't disappear overnight. Every Sunday at 15 o'clock, I had a strange feeling of being lost. My body remembered that I should be at my mother's house at that time, helping make dinner, listening to their stories. I remember the December evening when I discovered a Christmas card from my mother in the mailbox. Her handwriting, familiar down to the last curlicue, trembled more than usual, as if she had written it in great excitement. "Dear Miriam," she wrote, "whatever the misunderstanding between us, we are still a family. Christmas is a time of forgiveness and new beginnings. Come home and I'll make your favorite cookies." I stood in the cold entryway, clutching that card in my hands, and cried, longing for something that never existed, for the family I had always wanted but never had. There was no admission of guilt in the card, no hint of understanding of my feelings, only an insistence on returning to my former role, disguised as an invitation. I held firm. I changed jobs. I was promoted to head of the logistics department in a competing company, with better pay and opportunities for growth. 2 months later, I moved into a new apartment, leaving my new address with no one who could pass it on to my family. Gradually, their attempts to contact me became less and less frequent, and then stopped altogether. The last echo of our connection was a message from my mother's former neighbor. She wrote to me in February that Winnie had been in a minor accident, not hurt, but very frightened. "Your mother is out of her mind," the neighbor wrote. "She says she doesn't know what to do without your help." I stared at that message for a long time, feeling conflicting emotions struggling inside. Part of me wanted to rush to help immediately, like I always did. The other part, the cynical part that grew out of pain and betrayal, wondered if this was just another manipulation. In the end, I just thanked my neighbor for the information. If something really serious had happened to Winnie, I would have been officially informed. Ezra and I's relationship grew stronger during this time. He supported me every step of the way, never pushing or judging. When I had my doubts, and there were moments like that, especially when my mother texted that she was seriously ill, it was Ezra who helped me stay determined, reminding me that I deserved a healthy relationship. He stayed over at my place often now. He even got his own shelf in the bathroom and part of my clothes closet. We talked about the possibility of moving in together at the end of the year when his college contract was up. These were plans I couldn't have even imagined before. Too much of my time and energy was spent on my family. I finished my coffee, gathered my paperwork, and glanced at the clock. It was time to get ready for work. Today was a special day, though. I planned to stop by the supermarket on my lunch break to buy groceries for dinner with Ezra. We were going to celebrate his small victory. an article that had been accepted into a prestigious historical journal. The day passed productively. I finished the quarterly report, had a team meeting, and even found time to help a new employee figure out the system. Around 14 o'clock, I left the office and headed to the supermarket, making a shopping list in my head. Ezra loved seafood pasta, and I decided to make that particular dish. The supermarket wasn't crowded. I grabbed my cart and headed to the fresh produce section. As I picked out tomatoes, I noticed a familiar figure in the canned goods aisle. My heart skipped a beat. It was my mother. My first impulse was to turn the cart around and walk away unnoticed. But something made me stay. Perhaps curiosity, or maybe just the certainty that I was no longer afraid of this encounter. I continued picking tomatoes, watching her out of the corner of my eye. She looked ruined, not just aged, broken. Her hair, which she had always meticulously colored, was now dull, with noticeable gray. Her skin had taken on an unhealthy grayish tint, and deep shadows lingered under her eyes. She hunched over, as if under the weight of an invisible weight, and moved slowly, with effort, even though she was only 62. Something clenched in my chest, a mixture of compassion and guilt. Had my leaving affected her so much? But then I reminded myself, she was an adult, capable of taking care of herself. Her condition is not my responsibility. Our paths crossed in the dairy department. She spotted me picking out Parmesan cheese. There was a flash of surprise in her eyes for a moment, then something akin to desperate hope, quickly replaced by the calculating expression I knew so well. "Miriam!" she exclaimed as if we had parted yesterday, not 6 months ago. "What an unexpected meeting!" I nodded, keeping my tone calm and polite, though my heart was pounding so hard I thought I could hear it all over the store. "Hello, Mom. You, you look good," she said, giving me an appraising look that read of ill-concealed envy. And I did look good. 6 months without the constant stress and guilt had done its job. I'd lost weight, my skin was clearer, and my eyes had a sparkle that hadn't been there in years. "Thank you," I said. "How are you?" It was a polite question without any real desire to hear a long list of her complaints. But she took it as an invitation. "Oh, Miriam, if you only knew what I've been through." She lowered her voice to a dramatic whisper. "After you. Since you left, things have gotten so complicated. Bills to pay, a house in need of repair, my health." I noticed her hands were shaking as she spoke. There was no wedding ring on her ring finger, the one she had worn all these years since her father's death. Perhaps she really had to sell it. The thought caused me a sharp pain. Whatever happened between us, that ring was a symbol of their love, the only true love of her life. "Winnie's not helping at all," she continued, and there was real bitterness in her voice. "Always busy with her own problems. And I've missed you so much, darling. You have no idea how worried I've been." She didn't say a word about why I left. Not a hint of acknowledgement of my role in the breakup of our relationship. Just complaints and hidden accusations. And yet, I couldn't help but notice that there was real pain behind that familiar mask. "I'm sorry it's been hard for you," I said sincerely. I really didn't want her to suffer. I just didn't want to be responsible for solving her problems anymore. "Maybe we could get together?" she suggested, taking a step closer and reaching out as if she wanted to touch me, but stopped at the last moment. "Talk, catch up. I can make your favorite dinner on Sunday." And there it was. An invitation to go back to the old ritual, as if nothing had happened. As if I hadn't discovered I was just a convenient resource for them. But this time there was a desperation in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. A realization that she really needed me, not as an ATM or emotional support, but as someone who had been a part of her life for 32 years. That realization almost made me agree. Almost. "Mom." I shook my head softly but firmly, feeling tears come to my eyes. "I don't think this is a good idea." Her face changed, the mask of friendliness slipping away, giving way to resentment and anger. "Are you still mad about that stupid text message? Winnie was just kidding. You were always too sensitive." I felt that familiar feeling of guilt and doubt rise up inside. It was how they always made me doubt my own feelings, my own reality. But now I knew the truth. "It's not about the message," I answered calmly, though I was trembling inside. It was about years of a relationship that had been one-sided. I wish you both well, but I'm not going back to my old role. She snorted, moving on to her next tactic, accusation. You've always been selfish, Miriam. Even when your father died, you thought only of yourself. And now you abandon your own mother when she's sick and alone. Her words sounded like simple manipulation, but there was some truth in them that hurt me. Was I really selfish, thinking only of myself now? Maybe I should have at least tried to help her, despite everything that had happened? But then I remembered 13 years of a one-sided relationship, 13 years of giving everything and getting nothing in return. And I realized that taking care of myself isn't selfishness. It's a necessity. I have to go, I said, stepping away from her, feeling a lump in my throat. I wish you well. She grabbed my hand, her fingers digging into my skin with unexpected strength. You can't just leave. I'm your mother. Her voice trailed off, and for a moment it sounded not angry but truly desperate. Ia, I don't know how to live without you, Miriam. Those words, spoken with such disarming sincerity, pierced through me. Perhaps, in her own twisted, unhealthy way, she really did love me. In her own way, not the way a parent should love, but it was the only love she was capable of. I gently but firmly released my hand. Yes, you are my mother, and I will always be grateful for the life you gave me. But that doesn't mean I should let you control that life. I saw a look of surprise on her face, then anger, then something akin to fear. Perhaps she had finally realized that she had indeed lost her useful idiot, and that this loss was irreversible. And at that moment she suddenly seemed very small and very old, not an overbearing, manipulative woman, but just a frightened woman alone with her life. Goodbye, Mom, I said, and turned the cart around and walked away, feeling tears running down my cheeks. I didn't look back, but I could feel her gaze drilling into my back. Part of me wanted to go back, to hug her, to tell her everything would be okay. But I knew that would be a lie. It wouldn't be okay if I went back to the relationship that had been destroying me for years. I finished my shopping, paid, and walked out into the parking lot, breathing deeply of the spring air. There was no anger or resentment inside, just a deep, almost unbearable sadness for what could have been, but never happened. For the family we could have made if we had loved each other right. As I got into the car, I allowed myself a few minutes to just cry, not out of self-pity, but out of realizing the tragedy of our situation. 3 women, bound by blood, but unable to create a real family. 3 lonely islands in the ocean of life. When I got home after work, I started cooking dinner. Ezra was due around 7, and I had plenty of time to get everything ready. I turned on my favorite music and immersed myself in the process of making pasta, chopping vegetables, roasting garlic, preparing the sauce. When everything was almost ready, I heard the sound of a key in the lock. Ezra, who now had his own key to my apartment, had returned. It smells delicious, he said, hugging me from behind and kissing my neck. You're spoiling me. I smiled, turning to him, hoping he wouldn't notice the traces of tears on my face. It's your day. You need to celebrate the publication properly. But Ezra knew me too well. What's wrong? He asked, scrutinizing my face. We ate dinner at the kitchen table, and I told him about the meeting with my mother. He listened intently, not interrupting, only squeezing my hand tighter when my voice began to waver. How do you feel after that? He asked when I was done. I thought for a moment. Sad, I finally answered. Sad that things turned out the way they did. That we couldn't be the family we should have been. But at the same time, peaceful. As if the last chain that bound me to the past had finally broken. He smiled and kissed me. You're the strongest woman I know. I wasn't always like this, I admitted. I used to be a useful idiot. No, he shook his head. You were always strong. You just used your power for others, not for yourself. Now you've learned how to channel it properly. I smiled, realizing he was right. My concern for others, my responsibility, my desire to help, they were all good qualities. The problem wasn't them. It was the way they were exploited by those who gave nothing in return. Later that night, as Ezra fell asleep next to me, I lay there, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the past 6 months. about how my life had changed since I decided to put myself first, about a new job where I was respected and appreciated, about a new apartment that was all mine, without a trace of their influence, about a relationship with Ezra that blossomed when I had the time and emotional energy to nurture it. I thought about my mother and sister. Did I regret the breakup? No. Did I miss them? Sometimes. Not the people they really were, but the people they could have been. The family I always wanted to have but never had. I remembered my mother in the supermarket, aged, frightened, desperately clinging to the last thread of control over my life, and a deep sadness swept over me. Not regret for her decision, but sadness that she had never been able to realize that true love doesn't control or manipulate. Real love is letting go. I turned on my side, looking at the sleeping Ezra. His face was relaxed, his breathing even and deep. Next to him, I felt safe, felt like myself, without having to justify myself, apologize, or conform to anyone else's expectations. That was true family, a place where you are loved for who you are. And I'd finally found it not in those I was related to by blood, but in the person who'd chosen me, and who I'd chosen. I closed my eyes, feeling sleep slowly envelop me. Tomorrow will be a new day in my new life, a life without toxic relationships, without constant guilt, without having to sacrifice myself for those who don't appreciate it. And I will greet that day with an open heart and a smile, knowing that I am finally living for myself.